Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo.
Hello, and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm very excited for you to listen to this next interview. I have virtually in front of me Jocelyn and Aaaron Freeman. They are a married couple who just recently released a book. If you are in a relationship or you're married, maybe you're struggling in your relationship, this is definitely a podcast episode you want to listen to. So if you can, listen from beginning to end, because I know you're going to learn a lot of helpful information. So without further ado, Jocelyn and Aaaron, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Hello, thank you.
You're so welcome. I'm very excited. I love having three people on a podcast. It's very rare. I feel like it just brings an extra texture and layer to things.
Absolutely.
So why don't you first just introduce yourself to the listeners by sharing who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do.
Yeah, so Aaaron and Jocelyn Freeman, without giving kind of like the highlight reel, I'll share where we were in the beginning. So we got into a relationship and we were not prepared or qualified for marriage. We both had past, my upbringing. I watched my parents get divorced, go through a really intense divorce. And then I repeated a lot of their patterns, unhealthy relationships, how I was showing up in conflict. I had very low self-esteem, poor body image. And then whereas Aaaron, his parents are married, 3 decades in,
Four
decades.
Over 4. And it was very loving. I went to they were always supportive. It's just that what I saw my dad specifically do is anytime conflict came up, he would just stop talking and he would leave the room. So in my perspective, that's a good thing, because he didn't react, didn't raise his voice, nothing like that. So it was all calm and peaceful. But then when I do that, modeled in my relationship with Jocelyn later on, it's like that causes her to feel isolated and shut out, and it would cause conflict. So we just realized, however we're brought up, we're going to model certain things that probably aren't going to be the best for the relationship. If nothing else, our dynamic as well, I'm a dynamic human being and so are you. So that dynamic creates our own unique dynamic as a couple. And no one can really tell you exactly what is going to be the very best thing for your relationship. We just knew at that time, we better seek some skills. We want to be the greatest partners we can be. And where do we go to get those kind of skills?
Yeah. So we realized our culture focuses so much on the attracting the partner, find the one. And then all the focus becomes about the wedding. And then if something happens or there's crisis, then it's counseling.
But don't talk about it.
Yeah, don't talk about it. And
it's really bad.
Exactly. And so we said that is so backwards. Why don't people invest into making sure you're set up for marriage, or invest into making sure your relationship or your marriage stays strong throughout preventatively? And that's where we noticed this was missing, and we created it. We've been working with couples full time for going on 6 years now. We host couples workshops. We've hosted over 42 events, the podcast, all the fun things. And then we launched our latest book just last month after getting a book deal during quarantine.
Wow. Congratulations. That's incredible. That's so awesome. That's so great. And that's so true. I just think that's the society we live in. It's fix it when it's broken rather than being prepared. I feel like we live in a society where saving money doesn't happen till later in life, or, me working in the health field, everyone is just you take the medicine or you worry about it when you get sick, but there's so many things that we can do preventatively. And so when it comes to relationships, you're so right. We're focused on the wrong things, right? And nutrition, you're focused on the scale. You're not focused on just your overall well-being. So you're focused on getting married, but are you even happy in this relationship? Do you even know how you're going to I feel the biggest thing that happens, I find in relationships, it's on the very first date, someone could be very clear about not wanting kids, and the other person could be oh no, I want kids. And they almost are hoping for that person to change. And it's it may have been really apparent to you very early on. That's really big. It's sometimes we don't want to hear what is actually happening. We can go in these denial phases.
Well said.
What it actually makes me think of, so Jocelyn and I have been down our own health and wellness journey. when we got together, she really introduced me to the power of nutrition. And my answer to her is like, oh, I feel fine. This is fine. And I was pretty much eating whatever I wanted, but I exercised all the time. Now, when you can choose whatever nutrition for yourself, but when I went gluten-free and no dairy and started doing intermittent fasting and like really looked at it, I'm like, dang, I didn't even know I could feel this good. I didn't even know relatively now that I actually felt bad before. So,
right.
And people do that in relationships.
That's exactly where I was going, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be in a place where things are going, let's say, bad. If you just even notice that you could fall into one of 4 categories, you could be at a dysfunctional relationship. The pains are a little more clear. You could be functional. You could be operating a household and your family fine, paying the bills. You can even feel how that's kind of like routine, a little bit mundane. And then you can be healthy. And most people think like, that's good. There's a whole other level. You can be a truly empowered couple where every day your challenges are turned into opportunities for deeper connection and aliveness. And it's like, people don't even know that's available. So you don't have to have things going bad, like dysfunctional or functional. You could be healthy. You can still get to truly empowered. Right. And that's really the message we like to bring forward.
I love that. There's like, you can thrive in it. You could be like genuine. It could be almost like that honeymoon phase can be all the time. It doesn't have to be like just in the honeymoon phase. And then you never feel that connection again. Like that.
Well, I want to address that because
it's a good point.
The honeymoon phase, right? So our culture wants the highlight reel. Yeah. People in relationships want the romance and the love and the vacations and the getting a house and starting a family. And they want all those great moments. Now, don't get me wrong. We've loved those also. Like they're great. I call them the sprinkles on top. I actually did a podcast today on our own podcast about how this honeymoon phase really isn't the thing that you should be focusing on extending. What you want to keep extending is true intimacy and growth in your relationship. There is no destination in the relationship. It's a journey. And so don't focus even just on the highlight reel. What we teach couples is how to embrace the challenges, because you likely are going to, whether it's about challenges about finances or challenges about your nutrition or challenges about how to parent or, people really working through communication challenges. So that's going to not feel like the honeymoon phase. However, you can experience true intimacy in the challenges.
Wow, that topic is still alive for you. Great.
That's so great. Well, so within that, I guess, because that's a fair point in a relationship, especially if you're with someone for a long time, their conflict is going to come up. That's very normal. So what's the difference between healthy conflict versus unhealthy conflict?
Yeah, great point. If you think about, you are either in 2 places at any time in your relationship. You are doing things and having interactions that are bringing you connection or things that are bringing you separation, really simply. So then to your point, the answer is pretty much the same. What's healthy conflict versus unhealthy? Are you taking actions in your speech or in actual actions, your responses to your partner that are bringing you connection, or are these things that are disconnecting you and causing separation? So when a challenge comes up, if you react from your patterns or your triggers, now you're like 2 boxers entering a boxing match. So you're facing off against each other. But you can have the same thing come up. And if you have the right conflict and communication skills, you can be on the same side looking at the challenge, more like teammates on a basketball team going against another team. And when you do that, your team gets stronger going through a challenge rather than in boxing going against an opponent. There's always a winner and a loser.
Yeah, I will also add too that, people think that when they feel emotion in a conflict, you made me angry, you made me sad, any of those things, they think it's now a free for all. I used to feel that way. Oh, if you made me upset, I can say and do anything I want. And that's where the most emotional damage gets created in a conflict, is what you say when you're triggered. Right. And so we teach, and we actually have a book called The Argument Hangover that just came out. The argument hangover is one of the worst parts. It's that period of time after a disagreement. And so in unhealthy conflict, that's very long. The hangover can be days, it can be weeks before you fully repair it. in healthy conflict as well, you repair faster. And, we can talk more about that if you want.
No, yeah. Well, I definitely want you to elaborate, but what just came to my mind is like we said earlier on, it's not about always being in the honeymoon phase. It's about just like loving the process and the journey. And that's the same thing with nutrition. Like in the beginning, everything is easy, but then things start to get hard, and it's really about the journey, and you're never really done, and you're always working towards something. So what you just said, like you're going to have slip ups in your nutrition. Like you're going to have slip ups in, you maybe miss the gym, but just because you missed the gym one day doesn't mean now you don't go back. Like people will like kind of go like weeks or, months without it. Right. And so it's important I think that's a really good point. When you have a healthy relationship, when you're in a healthy relationship, you can kind of bounce back from an argument. It's not like this big, long thing. And when you have a healthy relationship with food or your body or your exercise regimen or just your self-care, you understand that there's going to be little bumps in the road, but that doesn't make or break, like where you don't go back to it, weeks or 2 weeks or 3 months later.
Yeah. Well said.
It even made me think of, if you kind of cheat in nutrition, can you just accept that happened and then get back to your commitment to the nutrition, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a number of dynamics that play into this, but very simply, when you are in a healthy relationship and you're often responding to your partner in ways that are bringing you more connection, when you have slip-ups, you can totally have grace and accept your partner and accept that this happened, and then get back again to the particular conflict resolution skills that have always served you. So I think that's such a great correlation between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess my question is, like, you mentioned about people getting triggered, and sometimes, and like you both said earlier, it's often from your childhood. It's often from maybe even a previous relationship. It's from what you've seen, right? So how does one take responsibility for that? Like, who's responsible for it? What if you have one person who's clearly aware and is willing to do the work, and the other person that is just like aware, but doesn't even know where to begin? Like, how do you handle because some people's trauma is really deep. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, I hear multiple questions in that. First off, when talking about triggers, most of us, 99.9% of us have them, and they often manifest in your relationship. Why? Because your romantic relationship reveals vulnerable parts of yourself. We say that relationships are mirrors for you. So it is mirroring back to you things that are inside of you. Now, triggers, yes, your partner might say something, and maybe it wasn't the nicest. Now, of course, they would ideally be open to shifting the way they said that. However, you can't control your partner's actions or behaviors or changes. So all you can do as a person who's committed to the work, self-development, working on yourself, is see, oh, this triggered me. Why? Where did that come from? What does it remind me of? How can I heal this? And when you look at everything as an opportunity for growth inside of you, you're taking 100% responsibility for your life. Responsibility is not blame. It doesn't mean that your partner wouldn't ideally have said it in a nicer way, or maybe those words didn't work for you. But I think that our work and our relationship has always been, what can we learn from this? And each of us take responsibility for reflecting on why that triggered us as an opportunity to heal. I used to have so many triggers around if my exes looked at another woman, because I had a lot of body image issues. I mean, issue is not the right word, but body image challenges. I didn't love myself. I didn't think I was beautiful. So any eye glance, barely, that triggered me, or certain words, because I felt insecure about my own personality. If they kind of made any comment about me doing something wrong, it reminded me of being a child and being, punished. Now, if I made it always about them having to do something differently, I wouldn't change. And you don't want to stay stuck in those emotional triggers. Anything else you'd add?
Yeah, one quick thing, in our book, we go into strategies for before conflict, during conflict, and after conflict. Now, we're really talking about going from a healthy to an empowered relationship. So, of course, you're in a partnership. So I think what's powerful is you do this work yourself. You recognize places that are triggers for you, but what you then say to your partner is an invitation, starting with what your positive intent is. So just going with Jocelyn's example, hey, Aaron, I realized that I Probably would have been better if I came up with my own example. So now speaking as Jocelyn says to me, Aaron, I realized that, I'm dealing with even some body image issues still. And there are some things that trigger that in me, meaning, hey, if you look at another woman, that's a trigger for me. So with the positive intent of us being an empowered couple or more connected, I'd like to make an agreement around looking at other women. So notice how this comes from personal reflection. You share your positive intent along with what your trigger is, and then ask them to help you and help both of you by coming to these agreements. I think that's the best place to start to and invite a partner into that type of growth with agreements.
That's a great strategy. I really love that. In your book, I'm sure there's a ton of information. Do you have any other specific tips or strategies that maybe the listeners can hear when it comes to improving, just general tips for improving communication? Because I do believe that communication really is everything. I'll be fully transparent. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost 3 years now. And it's so funny. I don't think I've had a relationship longer than that because it always ends around that two-ish year mark, because when things get hard, I'm fully transparent. But we're really committed to each other. And but things are starting to come up, and he'll say to me that I'm not listening. But it's not that I'm not listening. I don't understand. I'm trying to understand what he's saying. And there's just don't, sometimes it's just he could say one thing. I think he's saying this and he's not. That's not what he's saying. So help us.
Yeah.
That's great.
I appreciate what you shared too, because I'm sure so many people are smiling relating to what you're saying. Gosh, I mean, there's a lot we teach on communication. 2 things came up for me to say. Number 1, communication is not one size fits all. So we actually, after having thousands of conversations, right? People always hear communication is the key to a relationship, and people go, great. How do I actually do it then, right? So we found that there are actually 4 communication personality types. We have a quiz people can even take to find out their partner's type. And depending on which type you fall into, you have certain ways of both expressing yourself. For example, Aaron is a reserved, inflexible partner. Or that's his default type. Yes. And so because he has more of a reserved nature, he processes silently on his own. Then he's ready to kind of express himself. If he doesn't often have that time to process on his own, his thoughts will come out kind of vague, unclear. If I kind of make him talk about it, no, tell me now. It isn't like he fully has formed the thought. So it can feel vague, similar to what you were talking about.
And just share my experience a little bit.
Sure.
So Jocelyn then is an assertive, inflexible type by default. So when she wants to talk about something, then I feel rushed. And more subconsciously, I would rather have my thoughts fully formed and developed before I speak. So if she's wanting me to talk about it now, and I haven't fully processed, I feel rushed, and all the things you said are right. But often I just say nothing because I actually don't even know what to say. Right. So that's really a powerful dynamic between an assertive inflexible and reserved inflexible, that pressure and that speed in which that conversation is expected to happen.
So there's a lot we could say about both our types and all 4 types. What I basically would say to you and then all the listeners is, by understanding your partner's communication personality type, you can approach them in the best way possible. You can bring it up in a way that they feel more open. And one, specific tip I'll give you, having learned his reserve type, what I do now is I give him a heads up if there's something I want to talk about. Hey, I'd like to talk this weekend about moving. Do you think that you'd be able to give it some thought before we talk to kind of formulate what your preferences are, your opinions? And then he'd be like, okay, yeah, I will. So by almost setting an appointment beforehand, he has time to think through it rather than me kind of blindsiding him and trying to rush him. And then the thoughts aren't clear, and then there's also techniques that can go backwards. So what I want you to realize is communication really is a skill that isn't going to just magically improve. You really have to devote yourself to learning communication skills, which obviously we can help with. That's what we do, primarily communication and conflict. But if you focus on learning the skills, you can learn to understand each other. You can learn to really empathize with each other's emotions and understand what need your partner is trying to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and one last quick thing to make the correlation to nutrition, you could not make a nutrition plan for a client and then have their partner use the same one and have it benefit, right?
Correct.
So, but in our minds, we think that there's like one way to communicate, but at least there's 4 different types. So you may have gotten more lucky if your partner is exactly the same type as you, though that does bring its own dynamics. Knowing your partner's type, okay, now it's like a different nutrition plan for each partner. Now you have a different set of ways to communicate with that partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where would people go get that quiz? Because I feel like that's definitely something I'm going to take once we stop recording. and I'll have my boyfriend do it too.
Yeah, it's called mycouplesquiz.com.
mycouplesquiz.com. Okay. I'm going to put all your information in the show notes for sure. So that'll be something that I put. You also just recently posted something on Instagram about when your partner is emotional or triggered and how to hold space for them. And so I think that's another thing that sometimes it sounds like in your dynamic, similar to mine and my partner's, which is like, I want to talk, he needs to process. But at the same time, I don't know, maybe it's not the same. I'm just, like I said, I'll just be fully transparent. I think it's always easier with like real examples. I find that like I am very, very busy, very focused. And sometimes like I don't realize that he's either sad or wants to talk about something. And then it kind of builds. And so I know that that's something I need to work on, is holding space to like communicate with him before it gets to that place. So what kind of tips do you have for, I don't know if it's like a preventative thing. I'm feeling like that's what we're really working on right now, is trying to figure out, like, we used to do date nights. Now with, I don't know, it's like inconsistent. We're currently moving. Like, there's just like so many things. So it's like, we're trying to figure out, like, we've tried like doing some walks together. Like, we're just trying to figure out something to hold space so that it doesn't get to like these big things that it didn't have to get there, you know?
So we're big fans and advocates of having what we call a weekly family meeting, even if it's a family of 2. And that ideally would be once a week to start. But if once a month is, more realistic, but let's talk about the once a week. So you're sitting down, or you could do it on a walk or at a park. Like, you even want to incorporate it into doing something fun, but there are actually 10 different areas of your life and relationship. And by knowing the 10 areas, and you kind of say, how satisfied am I in this area? And then, you can talk about what would I like different or new, or what's my intention here. That can be the safe space to have each of you express yourselves. Otherwise, it's kind of like, how are you? I'm good. And, and then the partner might not express, or they might not have even thought of it. Or sometimes people don't even know how to categorize it, especially reserved partners. And so by having that, we have a weekly family meeting that actually comes with our book, our first, by the way. So that's a free people get, but which we can also tell you about. So in using the weekly family meeting, you have a structure to check in on all 10 areas. And by addressing that, and you're giving a safe space, it could be 30 minutes where each of you can express yourselves, something will come up. Right. And if it really is created as a safe space, there's no judgment, there's no interrupting, there's no defensiveness, then you can talk through it and work through it together.
Well, and even to take that, I think, one step further, because it's not just a general thing. So actually with that, you're actually going to rate your own satisfaction in each one of those areas. So, there's, physical, there's mindset, there's spiritual, there's family, friends, finances, intimacy. So by doing that, and you're honest about what your individual level of satisfaction is, and then your partner does that, then you talk about it. It's a way to, a lot of times when you're really busy, probably like both of you, you're not having those areas conscious of top of mind. And those are kind of the things that end up becoming some bigger conflicts, because you weren't really present to it. Like, for instance, I might say something to Jocelyn like, "Hey, I wish you were initiating sex more often." But then immediately she might say, "Well, what have you been doing?" And like why that was probably coming up is because without getting the awareness, maybe her level of satisfaction and intimacy has been like a 3 or 4 recently. So that's why that kind of reaction happens. So more preventatively, if you're actually talking about your level of satisfaction, you bring it out into the open. But then, of course, their follow up is, well, what would have you increase that? What would have you get to an 8 or a 9? Then that's going to have you have this awareness about each other. There'll be a great conversation. It is kind of challenging at first, but now you're kind of keeping those bigger things from happening in the future as like a blow up or a reaction.
Yeah, that is so helpful because exactly what you just described. Like, so, we could get together and like plan to talk, but it's like, how was your day? What are you working on? Like, and then we might talk about something, we might talk about it might be a great conversation, great connection. Like it is a healthy relationship. But like you said, there's another layer to that. And I think that's such a great, helpful tip to go through all those things and to rate. And that's when you're like having the hard conversations, right? Rather than kind of just like dilly-dallying around it. That's awesome. So great. Awesome. All right. So I guess I feel like there was one more question that I guess the main question where we can kind of start to wrap things up. And then I want to hear a little bit more about like your book and where people can find it. But what would you say are like the most common mistakes you see couples make when they're in the middle of an argument?
Well, definitely letting it be a free for all, which a free for all means you can say and do anything you want. And so we talk about in our book, as well as, we'll share here, that you want to really create agreements for times of conflict. Now, I know that sounds odd, like, boy, you like sit down and create agreements. Yes, you literally sit down and create agreements. What are the no-goes? What are the non-negotiables? The things that are not healthy for us? So some examples are no yelling, no name calling, no swearing, no bringing up the past, no storming out of the room. We have a whole list of them in the book that you can create. And by creating those agreements, you're now both accountable to those agreements, meaning, yes, it might be a topic and it's starting to make you both feel emotional. You can feel the emotion that's going on and still keep to your agreements. Just because you're mad doesn't mean you now get to storm out of the room. No, you hold to the agreement, because if you do keep to the agreements during conflict, you'll do less damage and your argument hangover will be much shorter. And come back to love and connection. And who doesn't want that, right? Like, do you want a 3-day period of disconnection because you let it be a free for all? No, you want to have an agreement and have your repair be much faster and keep that argument hangover shorter.
Yeah. I mean, because it affects when there's love, when there's real love, when you really love your partner, and you can't help but when you're in disagreement with your partner to not like that's not like in the back of your mind while you're doing your work throughout the day. Like I really don't think you can fully show up as yourself if you're in an argument with your partner that's been lasting for a few days. It's just like so heavy. It's so emotional. It just really weighs you down. And it really affects so many areas in your life. Before we started recording, I was sharing with you, like a lot of people I work with struggle with emotional eating or binging. And so their relationship with food, we're working on it. But at the same time, it's like, if they're in a relationship right now and where their relationship isn't like super healthy, or they're lacking those communication skills, often those are the things that tend to trigger the binges or trigger the I don't care mindset. Like, oh, you start again on Monday, because their relationship isn't stable. And so I think what you're sharing is that like, it's okay to have conflict in a relationship, but you do want to develop the skills. So there's some stability within that, so that you can also do all those other areas and in your life that are important to you, really show up for them.
So true. It does impact every area, conflict. And you said it perfectly. Healthy conflict is still a part of a relationship, but you definitely have different skills and techniques than just letting it be damaging conflict.
Totally.
It's interesting you bring that up, because we haven't talked with a couple too much about this, but literally just yesterday, and we would never share names, we were doing a breakthrough session with a couple. One of the areas that she wanted to work on that they hadn't really talked about was health, and specifically nutrition. And she shared, I didn't get the whole backstory for him, but apparently he's very focused on like really clean eating and being very structured. And one of the things she shared was that she feels judged and she feels unsafe when she has a Dr. Pepper. And that was like the specific thing that she said. And this actually had not come up between both of them. So she felt very obviously judged and structured and really not loved, accepted, safe. She's very insecure by how he was responding to what she would eat. So often we don't really like pause, right, to even share with our partners some of the little back and forth actions and responses that we have with each other. We think, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to cause a conflict, which, okay, on the surface, drinking a Dr. Pepper, you want the partner to respond differently. But when you get down to it, it's like, oh, I realize I'm not feeling secure. I'm not feeling free. And that's really the level you want to get to. So it's not like this isn't important. It's like, what is the real impact it's having on you? And being able to share that with your partner is super powerful, very insightful. It brings more understanding and clarity.
Definitely. Oh, this is so good. Where can people find your book? Because I want to go like read it right now.
Oh, yeah. So The Argument Hangover is the name, and you can purchase it at all retailers. But when we're on podcasts only, we actually have some extra special bonuses.
Nice.
So if you go to theargumenthangover.com and you enter your receipt number, you get $200 worth of bonuses, a communication and conflict course, a workbook. And so that's theargumenthangover.com. Just put your receipt number and get those right away. And then as far as connecting with us otherwise, we're super social on Instagram. We're Meet the Freemans. We have a podcast as well, Empowered Couples. And yeah, from there, you can really find out everything that we have. We post about our quiz. We post about challenges that we do. You can kind of find out everything we have going on.
That's awesome. So yeah, you coach couples, it sounds like, as well, right? So maybe talk a little bit more if someone was looking to maybe work with you, what that would look like.
Yeah. So we start off with what we call a relationship breakthrough session, and that is done via Zoom. And in that session, you're guaranteed at least one breakthrough, something new you each can do, a new aha, like you really do break through something in that first hour. And you really get a sense of our coaching style to make sure you enjoy it and like it. So you can really, you can DM us on Instagram to talk about that, or you can go to our website, Meet the Freemans, and then you can schedule it on there.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Well, go and definitely follow Jocelyn and Aaron. I'm going to put all of that information in the show notes. Their Instagram is incredible. That's how I found them. So if you're not already following them on Instagram, definitely go follow. If there, is there any like last minute comments, questions, things you wanted to go over today?
Well, even before that, maybe you had something. I just wanted to acknowledge you. I really appreciate that you're in the space and you're helping individuals with their nutrition, and then also realizing the correlation that is to the health of their relationship, how on the same team they feel, how supportive with each other, their self-confidence, because that's going to show up in your communication. The more you love yourself, the more love you have overflowing in your own cup for your partner. So honestly, I really appreciate that you bring this forward and that you're even having us on to more specifically bring that relationship piece. So I just want to thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm excited. So I'm actually in the people have been hearing me about me writing this book for 2 years. Writing a book takes a while. I don't know. It sounds like you guys did it in a year, which is amazing. I'm struggling, but I am at the end. I'm actually at the point where now, nutrition is my expertise. Relationships, I'm just talking from personal experience of my history. And so now I'm at the point I'm kind of like everything. I'm going to like keeping this podcast. Once it's out, I'm going to keep the recording for myself to look back. So I'm going to give you guys credit. There was a part about the non-negotiables that's in chapter 10, where I talk about it with their nutrition. And I need to always be tying it back to relationships for it to really flow. So now I'm at that point where the whole book is done. I'm just going through and like starting to bring in the experts now to kind of just like lift it and fluff it a bit, So I'm super excited. I'll let you guys know, obviously, like, I'll let you know, like kind of what I say there. But as you guys were talking, I was like, oh, that would be a perfect little, just like a couple paragraphs about, the non-negotiables and how it relates to relationships. So I'm excited.
That. Yeah, you've been fantastic. We really appreciate being on your podcast.
Oh, you're so welcome. All right, guys, definitely. Thank you guys so much for being here. For those who are listening, if you're not already subscribed to the Tips of Tony podcast, definitely hit that subscribe button. A new episode comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And when you're subscribed, you don't miss a beat. If you liked anything in this episode, let us know what you learned. Share it with someone. Screenshot it. Share it on your story. Tag me. Tag Jocelyn and Aaron. Let us know what your biggest takeaway was. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you guys for listening. As always, this is Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.